Hello and welcome to the second event in our IdeaSpies conversation series. I'm Lynn Wood, the Chief IdeaSpy and the founder of IdeaSpies. In this event, we'll be discussing the opportunities for nuclear energy in Australia. And you can find lots of ideas on this topic on the IdeaSpies platform by typing nuclear into the search bar. I'm joined today by our IdeaSpies industrial editor, Michael Sharp, who will be our keynote speaker for this event. Michael is an advocate for the future of energy in Australia and is the founder of the Nuclear Capabilities Forum, which includes leading industrial companies and researchers to boost Australian capabilities to manufacture and gain access to global supply chains in the nuclear industry.
Oh, good on you, Lynn. Great to be here. 2 years ago, I formed the Nuclear Skills Forum, and we had Australian manufacturers wanting to be involved and see how nuclear energy plays around the world and how Australia could be a part of that. Currently, for many years, Australia has banned nuclear energy. So there's 2 federal government laws that ban nuclear power in Australia. But that doesn't stop our companies from using their world-class resources and capabilities to join global supply chains. And so we've been able to connect with companies like Rolls-Royce out of the UK and talk about their small modular reactor technology. We've also engaged with NuScale Power out of Seattle, again with their SMRs, and they're the first company to get regulation approval in the US. So there's a lot of innovation going on right now around nuclear power, and it just makes sense to me that we should all be a part of that. So IdeaSpies, the platform, plays a key role in the communications of good ideas that do good. So maybe, Lynn, we could share the screen because there's some great ideas I'd love to share with everyone. It's a really simple platform. You just go to the search bar there, and perhaps first off, Lynn, we type in nuclear fuel, because the reason I raise this is whenever I talk about nuclear for power, the first thing people say to me is, oh, what about the waste? And yet there's so much innovation going on now around nuclear fuel recycling. And so if you have a look there, there's quite a few articles, but spent nuclear fuel recycling, there it is. And other ideas with nuclear there for space and so much more. It's going on. But the ideas are there, so that the links to information are there available to anyone in the public. So feel free to share these ideas. And if people talk to you about the nuclear fuel cycle, you can have some information at hand to be able to share about all the great innovations that are going on right around the world right now that we can all benefit from. Lynn, you know this, but one of the things I say to people is that only 15 years ago, the iPhone did not exist. People were concerned about the iPod before the telephone and a new platform called iTunes. And we were all wondering if we would spend 3 or 5 cents on downloading a song to this mobile device. And yet here we are, 15 years on with the iPhone, latest technology. Think about the skills. There was no such job as an app developer. And yet now we've got some fantastic new minds working in that space globally. So you can never say never anymore, and technology keeps shifting, and so it does with nuclear as well. The Tesla motor car didn't exist 12 years ago. The first ones came off the assembly line. So think about that and how much these electric vehicles are changing the dynamics. And then I'm sure we can all relate that only 3 years ago, and it seems remarkable that it is 3 years, but COVID hit us. And for me personally, I had never heard of Zoom only 3 years ago, and yet here we are. We treat it as normal now, and it doesn't matter where in the world I am. I can be in the car, what I like to call the mobile Zoom studio, and communicate to the world. So here we are. Technology does not stand still, and it certainly doesn't do that with nuclear. So the first small modular reactors that Rolls-Royce described to me were in the nuclear submarine fleet, and that's over 60 years ago. So think about 60 years ago, the sort of cars we had were in Australia, the likes of the FJ Holden, or maybe the old Vauxhalls in the UK, and the Oldsmobiles in the US. And now we have the Tesla electric vehicle. So you can see how things change, and so it does with the nuclear industry as well, because nuclear is so much more than just energy. But I know today we're spending time on nuclear power. So perhaps, Lynn, we go and search on the bar around fusion. And if you just put in the word fusion, you'll see some of the latest news going on with this topic. And because industry itself does not stand still, and with nuclear that's the same, so you'll see here about revolutionizing the energy with advanced fusion. And there's so much talk in Australia. We have the relatively new Australian Space Agency. So Australia has a big focus on space now, and we're a signatory to the NASA Moon to Mars mission. And so there's a lot of work going on around fusion energy and what that looks like for producing power on the moon and potentially in Mars. But then it goes on to so much more. So these ideas are there for everyone to share. If you're looking for information to educate yourself, go for it. If you want to share this information with friends, you can copy the link and text it to them on your iPhone. It's as simple as that. But this is where we post the latest information around the whole industry. And for Australia, it's about getting manufacturing companies involved in these global supply chains, and that will help us to create higher skilled jobs, upskill the workforce for the next generation. And we certainly need to get more people involved in manufacturing, that's for sure. If we just go to nuclear power, Lynn, there's some great ones there around just nuclear power itself. And you can see that you can just use these words and it comes up with the various ideas. So you can see there, Rolls-Royce are now talking about galactic nuclear engines. And this is using nuclear research and then commercializing it into real world technology to be able to go from the moon to Mars and who knows where from there. As I said earlier, you can never say never anymore. We live in amazing times. But to today's world, look at these skills that we're learning and embarking on. And we know that from space, we've had technologies come out of the space race, like simple things like, well, we say simple, but Velcro and other products that have come out of the space race. So I reckon we ain't seen nothing yet. But you can see there's plenty of ideas there around nuclear power in so many different forms. And this is what's happening today. This is research in action. Researchers from universities around the world connecting with industry in Australia, the United Kingdom and the US and many other places, but then commercializing this technology to, I know there's work going on with companies out of the US to supply new energy sources to countries like Poland, for example. So who wouldn't want to be part of these global supply chains, because more and more we're interdependent. And so we have these great opportunities for doing so much more. Plenty of ideas, as you can see, but if we go to another word, Lynn, if you don't mind, if you put in propulsion, because as I said, I'm down here for the Avalon Air Show, and naturally that's around defense and the broader Air Force and others. But right now we're waiting, and it's only a few weeks away, that we'll have the Prime Minister of the UK and the Australian Prime Minister visiting the White House to talk with President Biden. And the three of those world leaders will make the announcement of the optimal pathway for the nuclear submarine fleet in Australia. So nuclear propulsion, of course, is a hot topic. And submarines, yes, but also for space. So it's exciting. Who would have thought? And yet here we are. And there's plenty of ideas there, real world research that's happening today, and also commercializing that research into action for today and for the very few years to come. Some great stories there about Australian companies leading the world in commercializing this technology. And we're not just talking about startup companies, we're talking about existing former heavy engineering firms that are now transitioning into adjacent markets to use their capabilities and their workforce to upskill and invest in new equipment to do new things and to sustain their company. So this also gets very interesting for a country like Australia, where we can transform industry and create these jobs of tomorrow, sustaining Australia's capabilities for the world. So this is why, for me personally, I get really excited about it. It was great to talk to so many different people last night at this event for the UK Embassy. It was also interesting to me that we had the Ukrainian ambassador to Australia in the room, and I had a great conversation with him. And all the talk was about Bushmasters, which are made here locally in Victoria and are currently being sent to Ukraine for their support. So there's a lot of good work going on. You can see here from the IdeaSpies platform, there's a great lot of ideas that, as Lynn very rightly says, ideas that do good. So great to be a part of it. We've got a great cohort at IdeaSpies. It is good to be amongst friends and good to see so many familiar faces here this morning. But happy to take any questions, and great to join you all.
Tim, you might want to comment on the safety angle.
Yeah, so I think it's one of those things where safety is tasked to risk. So if I say that if you're going to hop on an airplane and travel to the US tomorrow, there is a small probability that you won't get off the plane at the other end. It won't make it there, but it doesn't stop you from going on the plane. And all engineering works this way, that you try to engineer risks out to create a safe environment. And the nuclear industry is the most highly regulated industry in the world. Everything has got triple redundancies. The safety cases are ironclad, and it goes beyond the Swiss cheese model of safety, towards which is where you've got to go through multiple small holes to get to a catastrophic position or to realize a risk, into having safety design as part of the core feature of the design. So I think it's one of those situations where the risk is managed, and as a safety, as technology is the precursor to safety. As Sharpie said earlier, you look at the generation of reactors that all the problems were. They were early generation reactors that were designed in the late 50s. If you look at the modern reactors and the technology in there, and the car from the modern car, it's chalk and cheese in terms of technology, efficiency, and safety. I think we need to remove our prejudices if we want to consider what best use energy practice looks like in the future. I believe it will be a mixture of different energy technologies, but nuclear has its role in there. Although, as an Australian, we can't actually do much in terms of nuclear power, but the nuclear industry is much beyond power.
Someone has their hand up there.
Yeah, thank you. And it builds on both of your points, Michael and Tim. I want to make an analogy with the minerals industry more broadly. So we get iron on the ground and we ship it overseas. We get bauxite out of the ground, we ship it over the seas. I'd love to know what we do with uranium right now, and then are the first steps into taking a bigger slice of this, adding more value to the processing? How do we move up the stack, granting that the likelihood of getting a nuclear power industry away in Australia is minimum 15 years away if there was the social acceptance of it?
And Tim might have some more insights into the uranium fuel cycle, but it was interesting for me that I pulled out a school project book from when I was in primary school, and it was about the nuclear fuel cycle. And then there was a whole policy change and government laws and regulations change that they stopped teaching nuclear in schools. And so I think we've skipped a generation there, and I think we've got some catching up to do. But maybe over to you, Tim, around the uranium side.
Yeah, I think Australia has the privilege of having some of the largest uranium deposits in the world. South Australia particularly has the most energy resource intensive land of anywhere in the world, but also has the privilege of paying the highest energy costs of anywhere in the world and having the most unreliable supply, or one of the most unreliable supply for a developed nation. So when you factor this in, the uranium, we dig it up, we process it into yellow cake, and get shipped elsewhere for value added manufacturing into fuel plates, cladding, and other barrier products that uranium is used for in the nuclear fuel cycle. And I think that where the opportunity is lost is we need to consider that nuclear fuel cycle is a circular economy. That we think of it as something we burn and it's fuel and then becomes waste, and that's a problem. But it's an opportunity because the new reactor design, especially those by TerraPower, which is Intellectual Ventures spin-off technology, that reaction technology uses waste from previous generation reactors as the fuel source. And then from that you create flux, and then from that flux you can do things like create nuclear medicine and do science and all research and other value-added activities. We tend to think of it as a closed system where we dig uranium up, we ship it overseas, someone else creates the value. We buy the plates back at probably tens of thousands of the cost of the original material. and then we burn it and we ship it back to France for some reprocessing. It gets encased in glass, then sent back somewhere for long-term storage, which is currently in the middle of Sydney. But that's a different discussion. So we need to be smarter in our approach to technology. The technologies that will get us to clean energy and net zero, they exist today, but we need to depolitify, take the politics out of the technology, because that's the part of the problem. We'll talk about green hydrogen, which is hopium, because it doesn't exist at scale. And also hydrogen is, I will say my big bugbear of hydrogen is that it uses energy to produce. That energy as electricity could be used to to power batteries directly, or directly feed into the grid. So we produce hydrogen with that, or you can produce hydrogen through dirty fuels, through fossil fuel reforming, which is worse for the environment. It's got very, very limited energy density. It's not very good for combustion. It's dangerous to transport. You need it's a large footprint to transport it, and then people want to either combust it or use a fuel cell to convert it to electricity in the end, which as a battery is about 30% efficiency, which is probably the worst efficiency of any modern technology they're looking at for clean energy. The other one is, the thermodynamics of converting it to ammonia, and then using ammonia as a fuel, or splitting ammonia back into hydrogen to use as a fuel, is even crazier. Or then even worse is taking a toxic gas as a fuel and then using it as a co-combustant in other combustible technologies, where you actually then put toxic emissions into the atmosphere as well. So it's just crazy. And I think when we start to decouple the politics from the technology, and I say it's not as an NSW employee, but just as a interested person in the community, we'll start to have proper discussion around what the net zero energy future looks like.